Stop buying ammo for the zombie apocalypse. Put down the EMP shield and listen. You are preparing for a movie script that was written in the 80s, while the actual planet is running a very different, very specific simulation. The data does not point to a sudden nuclear winter or a fungal zombie outbreak. It points to a slope. A slippery, jagged slope of rising heat, shifting water, and economic strangulation. The scientific consensus has mapped out 3 distinct roads we might travel down in the next few decades. We call them scenarios, but for you, they are survival environments. Scenario 1 is the 4-degree nightmare, a systemic collapse where geography decides who lives. Scenario 2 is the managed struggle, a 1.5-degree world of high taxes, hard choices, and expensive safety. And Scenario 3, the most likely path, is the messy middle, a 2 to 3 degree world of chronic stress and uneven chaos. Today, we are not talking about general prepping. We are running these 3 simulations. We are going to drop you into each timeline, look at the specific threats like wet bulb heat and supply chain failure, and figure out the exact physics of staying alive in each one. This is not about fear, it is about calibration. Welcome to the curriculum. Here is how this works. We are going to treat these 3 scenarios like distinct video game levels. Each level has different enemies, different rules, and requires a different loadout. If you bring a bunker mentality to a managed adaptation scenario, you will go bankrupt. If you bring a paperwork mindset to a 4-degree collapse, you will die of thirst. For each scenario, we will start with the sensory reality, what it actually looks and feels like to wake up in that world. Then we look at the failed reaction, the mistakes the average person makes that gets them killed or displaced. Then we hit the logistics, the hard skills you need. And finally, the twist, the specific, nasty detail about that climate reality that most people miss. Before we start the first simulation, I need you to understand that the most likely outcome, the one we are currently tracking toward, is the third one. But to understand why that middle road is so treacherous, we have to look at the edges first. We have to look at the nightmare scenario. Let us load Simulation 1. Extreme warming. 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. This is the failure of all mitigation. This is the edge of habitability. It is late July in the year 2060, and you are living in a region that used to be considered subtropical, maybe parts of the American South or Southern Europe. The forecast called this a once-in-a-century heatwave, but you have had 3 of them this decade. The air is not just hot, it is heavy. It feels physical, like a warm, wet blanket wrapped around your face. You step outside at midnight to check the generator, and it is still 95 degrees Fahrenheit with 90% humidity. Your sweat does not evaporate, it just pools on your skin, hot and sticky. This is wet bulb territory. Inside, your neighbours are quiet. Too quiet. The power grid buckled 6 hours ago under the strain of 1 million air conditioners fighting a losing battle. Now the silence is heavy. You can hear the hum of a drone overhead, scanning for thermal signatures of bodies that have not moved in a while. The heat isn't uncomfortable, it is metabolic poison. Your body's internal cooling system has shut down because the air outside is wetter and hotter than your lungs. You are cooking from the inside out. In this 4-degree world, the masses die because they treat heat like an inconvenience rather than a predator. They rely on active systems. They think, I have a great AC unit, I will be fine. But in a 4-degree scenario, the grid is the first casualty. Infrastructure melts, transformers blow. When the power dies, the house they built, a glass and concrete box designed for a climate that no longer exists, turns into a solar oven. They retreat to the basement, but in this scenario, the heat often comes with extreme humidity and flooding. The basement is a mould trap. They try to drink water, but they do not account for electrolyte loss, so they flush their systems and go into seizure. They wait for emergency services, but the ambulances have overheated engines, and the triage centres are overwhelmed. The failure here is a lack of redundancy. They bet their lives on the switch on the wall working forever. When it clicks and nothing happens, they have exactly 4 hours before heatstroke sets in. Survival in the 4-degree band is about passive cooling and geography. First, geography. If you are watching this channel, you likely have some ability to choose where you live. In this scenario, living in the wrong latitude is a death sentence. You need to migrate toward higher latitudes or regions with reliable water tables and moderate climates. Do not buy property in the Sunbelt if the models show it becoming a furnace. But if you are stuck, you need physics on your side. You need a home that cools itself without electricity. This means exterior shutters, not interior blinds. Once the sun hits the glass, the heat is already inside. You need cross-ventilation designed to pull cool night air through the structure. You need radiant barriers in the attic. And for the body, you need low-tech evaporative cooling that works when the grid is dead. A simple wet sheet hung in a doorway with a draft can drop the temperature by 10 degrees in dry heat. In wet heat, you need a stockpile of chemical ice packs or a designated safe room that is super insulated to hold the night's lower temperatures through the day. Here is the twist for the 4-degree world. You might nail the heat survival. You might have the shutters and the water systems. But the real threat in this scenario is systemic isolation. In a world with 4 degrees of warming, adaptation limits are breached. This means roads wash out and are not repaired because the state is bankrupt. It means the internet goes down and stays down. You are not just hot, you are alone. The government retreats to protect core assets, usually the capital and key industrial zones. If you are in the periphery, you are in the grey zone. Security becomes the primary survival asset because desperate people migrate. And they migrate to the places that still have water. Your survival plan must include a social element. You cannot defend a homestead alone in a systemic breakdown. You need a community that functions as a microstate. We are about to shift gears to the managed world, the 1.5 degree scenario, which brings a completely different set of headaches involving money and bureaucracy. But before we switch simulations, a quick note. If you want the raw data maps showing which specific regions fall into these wet bulb danger zones, I have linked the resource packet below. It includes the hazard maps for coastal inundation and the heat stress projections. Don't guess where to live. Look at the math. Secure your spot on the email list while you are down there, because that is where we share the intel that doesn't play well with the algorithm. Okay, let's cool things down. Simulation 2. Reset the simulation. Now we are in the optimistic timeline. Scenario 2. The world got its act together. Carbon emissions plummeted, governments coordinated, and warming was capped at roughly 1.6 degrees. It sounds great on paper, but let's look at your Tuesday morning in this world. You wake up in a city that looks green. There are trees everywhere to combat urban heat islands. But you open your mail, and it is a notice from the insurance conglomerate. Your premium just tripled because your neighbourhood has been reclassified as a Zone B flood risk. You are not fighting zombies, you are fighting actuaries. You drive to work in an electric vehicle that forces you to charge at specific times to balance the grid. The seawall protects the city, but the cost of maintaining it means your taxes are astronomical. This isn't the apocalypse. It is a world of intense, managed friction. Every decision is regulated, priced, and monitored to keep the biosphere stable. You are safe, but you are broke. The failure mode in the managed world is financial and legal drowning. People panic in the wrong direction. They buy guns and gold, thinking chaos is coming. But in a strong mitigation world, the government is powerful, not weak. The danger isn't a marauder kicking down your door. It is a zoning board condemning your property for managed retreat. The person who fails here is the one who ignores the hazard maps. They buy a cheap house on the coast, thinking they got a deal, only to find out 6 months later that the area is being decommissioned and services are being cut off. They try to fight the climate adaptation measures instead of aligning with them. They become uninsurable. And in a modern, hyper-connected economy, if you are uninsurable, you are invisible. You cannot get a mortgage, you cannot start a business, and your asset value goes to zero. Survival in the managed 1.5-degree world requires a different toolkit. It is less about bushcraft and more about adaptability and financial literacy. First, you need to understand climate gentrification. Safe land, high ground, temperate weather, good water access will become the most expensive asset on Earth. Your survival strategy involves getting a foothold in these resilient zones early, before the prices lock you out. Second, you need to retrofit your life for regulations. This means your home needs to meet the new, strict efficiency codes to be viable. It means water retention systems in your garden, because water rationing will be a standard municipal policy, not an emergency measure. Skill-wise, you want to be in industries that plug into the transition. Renewable energy maintenance, adaptation planning, resilient agriculture, retrofitting construction. The economy will pivot hard to these sectors. If your career is tied to industries that are being legislated out of existence, you are vulnerable. The twist in the managed world is that the crisis becomes invisible to the privileged and crushing to the poor. We call it the resilience divide. If you have the capital to upgrade your home and pay the green taxes, life is good. But if you fall behind, you get pushed into the sacrifice zones. The areas the government decides are too expensive to save. The seawall stops at the rich neighbourhood. The flood pumps prioritise the financial district. Your survival depends on staying on the right side of that line. It is a class war disguised as environmental policy. You need to be hyper-aware of local municipal plans. Attend the town halls. Read the 20-year development plans. Know where the new flood defences are being built and move there. In this scenario, information is more valuable than ammunition. Now, wipe the slate clean. Forget the total collapse and forget the utopia of perfect management. Let's look at the data. Current policies, pledges, and economic inertia point to one place: the middle road. Scenario 3. Roughly 2.3 to 3 degrees of warming by 2100. This is the baseline. This is the world you should actually be prepping for. It is not a Hollywood movie. It is a grinding, uneven, messy reality, where some years are fine and others are catastrophic. It is a world of chronic stress. The supermarket has food, but the prices fluctuate wildly because a drought in Brazil killed the soy crop. The power works most of the time, but rolling blackouts during heat waves are normal. The government exists, but it is overwhelmed, constantly putting out fires, literally and figuratively. This is the boiling frog scenario, and it is the hardest one to prepare for because it lulls you to sleep. Let's zoom in on place in this middle road world. You live in a suburb that was built in the 2020s. It's late summer, the news is playing in the background, talking about a Category 5 hurricane hitting the coast 1,000 miles away. You don't care, because you're inland. But then you go to the tap, and the pressure is low. The regional reservoir is at record lows because the snowpack didn't form last winter. You get a text alert. Mandatory water restrictions. You look outside, and the lawn is dead. The trees are brown. The air quality index is red because of smoke from wildfires in the next state. You aren't in immediate danger of dying, but the quality of life is eroding. The infrastructure around you is crumbling faster than it can be fixed because the freeze-thaw cycles and heat expansion are tearing up the roads. This is the texture of the 3-degree world. It's the pothole that never gets filled, the brownout that ruins your fridge food, the water that smells like chlorine because they had to over-treat it. The common reaction here is what psychologists call normalcy bias, mixed with misplaced hope. People stay in deteriorating regions because they have family there, or because it's always been like this. They treat the megadrought as a dry spell. They rebuild the house in the floodplain exactly as it was, thinking the last flood was a freak accident. In a 2 to 3 degree world, these aren't accidents. They are the new statistical norm. By staying put in a fragile region, like a water-scarce city in the desert or a sinking coastal town, you are bleeding resources. You spend your savings repairing the roof, buying bottled water, fixing the AC. You are running on a treadmill that is speeding up. The failure is refusing to retreat when the signal is clear. The logistic move here is strategic mobility. You need to audit your location on 3 criteria: heat, water, and governance. Look at the projections for 2050, not 2024. Does your region have a secure water source that is not dependent on a shrinking snowpack? Is your local government solvent, or are they drowning in debt from disaster recovery? If you can move, favor regions with moderate climates and strong institutions. If you cannot move, you must micromap your hazards. This means knowing that the basement apartment floods, but the 3rd floor is safe. It means understanding that the south side of the city gets trapped in a heat island, while the north side, near the park, stays 5 degrees cooler. You adapt your housing choice within the city. You rent or buy based on resilience, not just the view. Avoid the top floor of glass high-rises. They become greenhouses in a blackout. Avoid the bottom of the hill. It's basic topography, but in this scenario, it saves you thousands of dollars and immense stress. The twist for place in the middle scenario is the concept of the stranded asset. You might think your home is your nest egg, but in a warming world, property values in high-risk zones can evaporate overnight. Not because the house is destroyed, but because the insurance market collapses, or the banks stop issuing mortgages for that zip code. You could be left holding a deed to a house you cannot sell, cannot insure, and cannot leave because all your wealth is tied up in it. The trap isn't the fire, it's the market's reaction to the fire risk. Survival here means liquidity. It means not having 100% of your net worth in a piece of real estate that sits in a climate crosshair. Let's talk about systems. The specific threat here is supply chain volatility. Imagine it's November. A freak late-season hurricane disrupted the ports, and simultaneously, a heat wave in the wheat belt killed the harvest. You go to the store. There is no bread. There is no pasta. The prices for rice have tripled. This isn't starvation. There is food, but it's expensive and scarce. Then the power flickers. It's a brownout. Your smart home hub disconnects. The electric locks jam. You are standing in your high-tech kitchen, surrounded by appliances that don't work, holding a bag of rice you paid $20 for. And you can't cook it because your stove is electric induction and the grid is down. This is the friction of the middle road. It's a series of small, cascading failures that make modern life exhausting. The failed reaction is reliance on just-in-time living. Most people have 3 days of food and 0 backup water. They treat the grocery store as their pantry. When the shock hits, they panic buy, which worsens the shortage. They have no way to cook without the grid. They have no way to cool off without the central AC. They are completely dependent on the macro systems functioning perfectly. When those systems hiccup, they become desperate consumers, paying gouged prices for basics. They react with anger, blaming politics instead of adapting their household infrastructure. They wait for the lights to come back on, and while they wait, the food in the freezer spoils. The solution is micro-resilience. You cannot fix the global supply chain, but you can buffer your home against it. This means a deep pantry, not a bunker full of MREs, but a 3-week supply of staples you actually eat. Rice, beans, canned goods, spices. Rotate them. It means diversifying your energy. If you have an electric stove, get a camping gas burner for outages. If you rely on city water, have a rain barrel or a bathtub liner and a gravity filter. For heat, look at passive retrofits. Insulation is the best survival gear you can buy. It keeps the heat out in summer and the warmth in during winter, even when the grid fails. Install backflow valves on your sewage pipes. This is a non-negotiable item in a world of increased flooding. It costs a few $100 and prevents raw sewage from backing up into your basement when the city drains get overwhelmed. That is the unglamorous reality of survival: plumbing and insulation. The twist here is maladaptation. This is when your solution to the problem actually makes the problem worse or creates a new one. The classic example is AC. As it gets hotter, everyone buys bigger AC units. These units dump waste heat outside, making the street hotter. They strain the grid, causing more blackouts. If your only plan is run the AC harder, you are part of a feedback loop that will eventually break. A true survivalist in this scenario looks for solutions that work with the physics, not against them. Using shade, airflow, and timing your activities creates resilience that doesn't depend on a fragile power plant 300 miles away. Don't build a fortress that requires a massive energy input to remain habitable. Finally, let's look at skills. In the middle road scenario, the crisis is often medical. The vector-borne diseases are moving north. Ticks, mosquitoes, new viruses. You are at a neighborhood barbecue. Someone collapses. It looks like heat stroke, but maybe it's a heart issue triggered by the stress. The ambulance is 20 minutes away because they are dealing with a flood on the other side of town. The hospital is understaffed because half the nurses are out with a respiratory virus from the wildfire smoke. You are standing there. The person is convulsing. Do you know the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke? Do you know how to cool them rapidly without shocking their system? Do you know how to clean a wound when the tap water is under a boil advisory? In this world, the gap between life and death is often the skill set of the bystander. The skills you need are not tactical. You don't need to know how to clear a room with a carbine. You need risk literacy. This means being able to read a weather radar and understand what a wet bulb warning implies for your physical limit. It means distinguishing between a rumour on social media and a credible alert from the meteorological agency. Practical skills include advanced first aid, specifically treating heat illness, dehydration, and infection. Learn basic home repair. If a storm blows out a window or a pipe bursts, you might not get a contractor for weeks. Can you seal a room? Can you patch a roof? Can you purify water with bleach? These are the skills of the 21st century. And socially, you need community skills. You need to know your neighbours. In a localised disaster, they are your first responders. If you are the weird loner in the bunker, you are on your own. If you are the guy who helped Mrs. Higgins fix her fence, her son might come help you clear the fallen tree off your driveway. Let's bring it all together. We looked at the edge of the abyss, the 4-degree collapse. We looked at the hard, expensive road of managed safety. And we looked at the messy, likely middle. The common thread across all of them is agency. You cannot change the global temperature trajectory. You cannot sign a treaty for the planet. But you can maneuver within the probability curve. Survival is not a binary switch. It is a game of margins. By insulating your home, you gain a margin of safety in a heatwave. By diversifying your income, you gain a margin against economic shock. By building a community, you gain a margin against isolation. The goal isn't to survive the end of the world. It is to live well in a world that is harder, hotter, and faster. Start today. Pick one domain, place, systems, or skills, and make one upgrade. Check your flood map. Buy the extra bag of rice. Learn how to treat heat stroke. Adaptation is cumulative. The more layers you add, the harder you are to kill. If you want the checklist version of this curriculum, including the specific gear for wet bulb survival and the financial audit for climate risk, I've dropped the link below. It is the intel you need to navigate the simulation. Don't be scared, be prepared. I'm Tom. This is Survival Curriculum. Stay cool.